Please join me in welcoming a man who needs no introduction, a friend certainly to myself in this conference, Mr. Gary Bolton. Gary's going to moderate our first keynote.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. All right. So we're going to have a great discussion beyond gigabit. So what I'm looking for you guys to do is to wave your hand if you have a question, and we'll work those into the discussion. So with that, I'm going to move over to this chair and kick things off. So does this work? All right. So, you know, can you guys see me? I'm going to stand up there for a second. So when I started my career before the internet, how many people started their career before the internet? All right, we got a few people my age in here. You know, one of my first jobs was brokering 56K modem deals with US Robotics and Intel to try to get them into telecommunications. And then, you know, when we started the internet, you know, I was a product manager for something called a 1 meg modem, which was lightning fast, 1 meg. And even 2010, when Blair 11 was working at the FCC to put in the national broadband plan, broadband was defined by the government as 1 megabit. And you know, here we are, I guess that was like 16 years later, and we're seeing networks that are not only 10 gig, but 25 gig and beyond. So at some point, you know, where is it when you have, it goes beyond speed to something else? And especially now as we start to move out to where, as you're deploying fiber or whatever services you are, there's maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 or more fiber providers, so it can't be about speed. So we have an incredible panel here representing some very unique operators. And what I want to do is to start with having each of our panelists introduce themselves, their company, and what is special about their company. And I'm going to start with Matt. I'm going to start with the guys who started in 2004. So I'll start with Matt and then Roger, and then move that, you know, from dates. But Matt, tell us a little bit about Vistabeam and why that's so special.
Sure. So I'm a Nebraska boy, but my roots actually in internet go back to a year and a half I spent living in Fort Collins, where I was a volunteer helping with Fortnet, which was one of the early dial-up ISPs. And my first real experience with broadband was putting an ISDN line in and having, you know, an always-on connection and kind of being able to see the difference it made to be able to do that as opposed to, you know, have to listen to, you know, and everything to try and get on. So I took that back to Nebraska with me, and we did dial-up in DSL, my first ISP, which I'd started in '97, and eventually sold out of that. And one of the things we really learned was you didn't want to be dependent on somebody else's infrastructure. Reselling dial-up and DSL was making the phone company a lot of money, and that kind of led to our shift towards doing fixed wireless. So I'd sold my first ISP and then started Vistabeam when they sold in 2004. And we started out focused on just fixed wireless, and you know, because it was the best tool for the job for the area we were in, and because there just wasn't a lot else available, and it was the only way that we could really put up our own infrastructure and maintain it. So we continued with that until here recently we started getting into doing fiber. So we went through the point where we now have, I think, 500 or 600 miles worth of fiber, about 5,000 passings, and are, you know, kind of working through. But one of my big beliefs is, you know, having the best tool for the job. There's places where wireless makes sense. There's places where fiber makes sense. But the one thing that's just a constant across all that is making sure that customers are respected, that the applications that they want to run are worked, and that they feel like they can trust working with you. Because as a wireless guy that's had to face fiber competition for 2 decades, if you don't take care of customers, somebody else will. So I would say that's one of the things that kind of makes us special, is it's really baked into our company's core values, is really focusing on the customer first and making sure that they get what they want to the best of our ability.
Congratulations, Matt. Just, you know, really bolstering what's available in the communities you serve. Now it's 100 communities that you serve?
It's a lot. I kind of lose track of it, but we've got about It's over 350 towers and about 50,000 square miles worth of coverage. So we call it Wyobraska-Rado, because it's kind of, that's the part of Colorado, it's kind of east of I-25. The west side, that's California-Rado over there. But Wyobraska-Rado is our primary territory.
All right, so addressing rural America, making sure that communities are connected. So let's go to Utah, and again in 2004, so these are all 22 years in the making. So Roger, tell us a little bit about open access fiber and what all happened in Utopia.
Yeah, so Utopia grew out of a need from cities. Cities were trying to get, their communities served, and they went to incumbent providers, and they weren't doing it. They're kind of a roll-up-your-sleeves attitude there, and in a lot of these cities, a lot of them have power utilities and other things because, it's kind of the frontier, in some ways. And so with that mentality, they said, well, if we can't get the services we need from these private companies, we're going to do it ourselves. But there's a uniqueness to Utopia in the sense, they said, we don't want to necessarily compete with these companies. We want to work with them. And there was this concept out there of open access. And so initially 11 cities decided in 2004 to bond for projects and build, and they built this open access network across those communities. It was a little bit of a rough start, but they eventually got that thing built out. And over the years, I mean, in those years, it was a little tough to go out there with fiber. People didn't even know what fiber was, right? And we're trying to convince people to, cancel your dial-up and switch to fiber so your email works faster and browsing the internet. We didn't have the applications we have today. So it was a little rough, and fortunately over time, demand for fiber has skyrocketed, and so not only has Utopia benefited from higher take rates and revenues, but other communities. So it started out as 11 cities. Other cities came, other partners came. We've expanded dramatically since that time, so now we're at 23 completed citywide fiber networks and about 120 with cities with some sort of connectivity for middle mile, schools, anchor institutions, things like that. And so we're unique, like what's weird or different about you guys? Well, one is we're open access, so we're the largest open access network in the country. We're a consortium of cities, mostly, which is fairly unique to do this. Is not just one city, but we're not a business. Some people think we're a business. We're a municipal consortium, publicly owned by these communities. But that's also not all of the things we have. We have these weird uniquenesses in our partnerships out there. So one of our networks that we partnered on was Yellowstone Fiber, and it's actually a nonprofit. I don't even know that there is another nonprofit broadband entity out there, but that's Yellowstone Fiber. Idaho Falls Fiber is one of our partners, and we also are Golden State Fiber in California in that partnership. And so while the Utah markets are called Utopia Fiber, we have these different brands and partnerships out there and different structures, but they're all open access and leverage kind of the economy of scale that we have. But yeah, we're about 280,000 passings across the networks, about 86,000 customers or so on those, and growing fast. So.
All right, so we heard Matt on a family-owned community broadband. We have municipal-owned open access. So let's move to 2012. So what was really interesting is, has anybody seen the Fiber Broadband Association documentary called Thought Waves? Yeah, if you haven't, go check on any of your streaming services, great. But what I really love about that is Blair Levin, was at the FCC doing the National Broadband Plan. He basically put the plan together, and Google came back and said, hey, we can implement that plan. And it's just a great story. And so that really elevated us from this whole, 1 megabit being broadband to the whole concept of a gig. So here's a private entity coming in and catapulting the whole industry forward to gig. So Alberto, tell us a little bit about Google Fiber and where you guys are heading.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for having us here. And the question was, what makes us unique? What makes us special? And I think that's actually almost changed. I think when we first started, it was, we're going to come and try to disrupt the internet industry. We're going to try to disrupt it by bringing fiber to the home, by making 1 gig the standard. And when we started in Kansas City, when we went to Utah after that, that was the selling point, is we're going to come and give you something different. The reality is now everybody does it. It feels like just being a fiber to the home network is not what's going to make you differentiate you anymore. I live here in Colorado. I live in Westminster, Colorado. I feel like we're the ground zero for the fiber wars in that we have 3 or 4 providers who are providing fiber to the home, who are sending ads every day. And so what makes you special? It's not that 1 gig anymore. It's what happens after the person gets that 1 gig. And we really pride ourselves on the customer service aspect of that. We've spent a significant investment into making sure that the construction hotline that people call, that somebody answers that within 30 seconds, that you have a live human who will address questions and can actually answer some of the things that come in. We're very transparent, and I think we'll probably get into some of this later, but on outages, we've really put a lot of effort into our app. And so when something happens, we're going to notify you through text, through app. We're going to notify you what's happening, not going to hide behind the fact that, hey, something happened with the network, but here's when you're going to be back on. Here's what we're going to do about it. So it's really how you treat the customer after that fiber to the home gets connected. And it's the price. I mean, we've been $70 a month for 1 gig of service since we started in Kansas City. That hasn't changed. That hasn't changed in over a decade, and it's kind of the gold standard with the company. If there's anything that's sacred in the company, it's that price point. So I think that, we've had to evolve to not just, our product is awesome, which we think it is, but it's what happens after that, because there's a lot of fiber to the home providers now, and you've got to take that second step after that if you want to be special, if you want to keep them.
Yeah, I think one of the other unique things about Google Fiber is you guys changed the rules on deployment because you had the advantage of you could go anywhere, so you're not limited to a certain footprint. And so if people don't take your franchise agreement, don't be able to make it easier for your deployment, you can just say, we'll go somewhere else.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And in Colorado, Utah is one of our my region is Colorado, Utah, and Idaho. Utah is one of our most mature markets, and Colorado we're pretty new to. We just started coming here in 2022, and that's exactly right. We have a different deployment style than some of the traditional providers use, in which we do something called micro-trenching, and that's different, and that's not for some jurisdictions. Some jurisdictions don't want to allow that. Okay, we'll go, there are some that will allow it. There's enough opportunities, enough markets out there that we can move around and that we can go and we can go to negotiate with a city who is going to want to do that. And not that we don't really try to convince people that the micro-trenching is acceptable, but we can't get to that point. There are a lot of jurisdictions out there that we have the ability to move around.
All right, so let's get up to 2014. So Colorado was really a little bit strange back there. Something called SB 152 or something like that.
Correct.
And you guys started all. So Dennis, tell us about Longmont and how you really started the broadband, the fiber revolution along the corridor, because all of a sudden, all these towns along the corridor started to follow your suit.
First, Roger, we're a non-for-profit. So now you know your first one.
I thought it was municipal.
Yeah, in 2014 actually, we were able to get around the SB 152 rule, and we started building a municipal network in Longmont, Colorado. Roughly, population today is about almost 100,000. We have 50,000 living structures, and we've built about 90% of them. It's been going great. We have 68% of the market right now against two Tier 1 competitors. We compete against Xfinity and Lumen, whatever the name is this week. So, yeah, we're doing real well. Still adding customers to the network each week. We offer 2.5, 10 gig to those customers, all the way down to a 100 meg package.
All right, so if I was to ask your customers what differentiates your network today, would they talk about speed or would they talk about customer experience? So I'll throw out whoever wants to take that first.
I think for us, it's customer experience. We go to a lot of community different events, and really we don't hear about speed. We just hear the fact that their service has never been down, and that's how they talk about us.
So reliability.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's kind of all of the things. Of course, we're not going to be successful with a 10 meg connection out there, but once you've kind of checked the box of gig or multi-gig, it becomes more, reliability, reputation, customer service, and just all the extras you can add on to that. Obviously, customers are looking for a little more than just a connection. So we're a little unique in the sense we're open access, and it's interesting because we see different approaches from different companies riding on our network. And one company may say, hey, we're the gamer provider, right? We're gonna have all the best peerings and lowest latencies to all the gaming networks out there. And another one would be like, hey, we're the Wi-Fi experts. We're gonna come in and help you in your home to make sure every spot is covered, and even your backyard, and even your shed is gonna have Wi-Fi and all. So there's different approaches, and I think those all are very important in today's world, because as much as the technologies have gotten better for that in-home experience, there's still a pretty big barrier for most customers of figuring that stuff out and not wanting to deal with it. So there's still a lot of differentiation out there to attract customers and keep those customers. So when you ask that question, it's like, well, why do you like your provider? It's like, because they help me with this stuff. I don't want to be a technology expert to make everything in my house work. And this was different when you just had to connect your computer. But the number of in-home connected devices now has skyrocketed to all of your automation stuff and security and how many iPads and phones and all this stuff. I mean, just think about what's the impact to you if you change out your Wi-Fi router and or you just change the password, right? How many things are you having to figure out? Oh, I got to go reconnect everything, and what's the password again? What is that on a notepad somewhere, a post-it note somewhere? Like it's a big deal. Like there's so much connected in our homes now that a provider who can step in and help with that, it's a big deal.
And I'll jump in on that too. I think it's both. I mean, for us, we offer our standard products are 1 gig, 3 gig, and 8 gig. And so, that's the speed, and that gets people in, and the affordability of it. But then you got to do the second part, which is the customer service part, and it has to work. GFiber came to Westminster. I signed up for it about 3 months ago. Probably the worst thing to happen to our tech team, because on the app, I'm always checking the speeds. I'm always checking what's happening. And the second it goes, it rarely goes under what it's supposed to. But when it does, I'll send an email in. But it's giving people what they have signed up for, because that's great. You sign up for 8 gig or 3 gig. You don't provide that 8 gig or 3 gig on a consistent basis, or almost a, always basis. It's going to lose your customers. So I think it's the speed that gets people in, but you've got to do the second part. You've got to have the customer service part. You've got to have somebody who will help them when they call in and not have to press 15 different numbers when somebody calls the 1-800 number. That somebody answers it, somebody can speak to your issue, they can give you updates on what's happening. Again, we put a lot of effort into the app, which is once you call, it creates a ticket. If you have an issue, that ticket is updated on the app. You know what's happening so that you aren't without your internet. And so I think it's both, and I think it is making a transition more to that second part of how do you treat your customer after you get them.
Let's talk about your 8 gig service.
Real quick on that, just a little bit of a contrary. I know one of the big focuses for us is accessibility. So we cover a contiguous area, so it's like where we have fiber, we cover outside of that with wireless. And I think a big thing, we have a very different demographic in a lot of the areas we're at. You guys are mostly urban. We have a lot of rural. And the demographic demand in rural is very different. Very few people are into the apps. Very few people are wanting to speed test everything. They just want their stuff to work. And so one of the things we really focus on is making sure that good service is available outside the city limits to more people and at an affordable price point. We've got price points that start around the $50 range, and we have a lot of people that's the most important thing, is getting something at a decent cost as opposed to going for the fastest speed. So that's definitely one thing that we've focused on. The customer experience and everything, we want to give them everything they can, but it's not just that. Accessibility, I do think, is a really important one.
So, Matt, tell us a little bit about the applications in your rural areas. What are they using? I mean, so obviously price points is one, but I'm sure there's agriculture, there's other applications. What are you guys running into?
Well, I mean, the elephant in the room, streaming. I mean, that's still like 75 to 80%, I think, of what the network traffic we see. It's basically displacing a lot of the satellite TV used to be out there. We do support all kinds of different, we've got ag applications where people are using it for precision agriculture, running businesses in rural areas. It's a big thing, is being able to have people that can work in a rural area that don't necessarily have to, come to an office. So what we're starting to, a big part of what we're seeing is especially telecommuting, because that enables rural areas to have higher paying jobs and people that can contribute to the communities that don't necessarily have to go to like a big office or have a central thing. So the fact that we've got, lower cost of living and in a lot of situations, a more pleasant living environment for somebody that wants to live in a rural area, that's probably the biggest driver, I think, for a lot of people in our area. The most primary application is providing a reliable connection that they can use to work anywhere. That's probably the biggest one.
All right, let's jump straight into AI. So AI is changing everything in a very rapid way. I just had Roger Entner from Recon Analytics on 5 for Breakfast, and his research, they have these huge panels of consumers, and his research shows that the participation in AI is determined by the quality of connection. So people, I think he says twice as many people participate in AI in a robust way on fiber than they do cable, and it goes on down. What are you guys seeing on AI, and what have you, what are the applications your customers are using from a consumer perspective, not your company perspective? But what are you seeing, and what are you preparing for? And I don't know who wants to jump that one.
Yeah, I'll make a couple comments. Obviously, there's a lot of ways to use AI, and still you see a lot of people like, when I think of AI, it's, I type my little prompt, and I get a response, and it does cool stuff. It'll make a picture, it'll do this, and it's like, that's such a basic version of AI, right? What we're going to see is almost everything with some sort of application enhancements or features powered by AI, and it needs to be fast. It needs to be, a lot of throughput. It needs the features that fiber and better broadband deliver. And I think of one, that I have. I mean, these things can be fun too, right? I have my little bird feeder, right? And it's like AI is identifying what kind of bird that is, right? And I want to know what that bird is right then, right? I don't want to be waiting around, but it's like all of these different applications that use AI. It's good if it's not noticeable, right? Like I didn't install AI. It's just there, and it's easy, and it works well. And so, what is the impact of broadband? Well, you need low latency, you need reliability, you need all those things to power that. And ultimately, what we'll see is more and more things coming online and using that connectivity because of the benefits that AI brings. So, from an ISP perspective or an operator perspective, it means, we need to be more reliable because people are using it more. We need more bandwidth, or we already kind of checked that box, but what we see is just trends. We see, here's your 250 meg package, here's your gig, here's your 2.5, and here's your 10 gig. Those are our tiers. And without us doing anything or changing our pricing, we've seen people migrate away from 250 meg to gig. That's our most popular now. And we're seeing 2.5 gig grow dramatically. And we're seeing 10 gig grow. And you always get the question, what are people doing with 10 gig? I'm like, I don't know, and I don't care, but they want it, and they're paying for it. So now we have, instead of the 5 to 10, early adopters, we're into the hundreds with residential 10 gig customers now. And we're like, okay, it's becoming a thing. It's what gig was when we launched it, and everybody said we were crazy that no one would ever use a gig, right? And it's like, it's still small, but it's growing. 2.5 gig is growing dramatically, and 1 gig's the standard, and people are paying more to get away from a 250 meg. We're basically saying 250 isn't good enough, and they'll pay more and want the gig. So again, but just back to AI, more. It's more and better of everything is what AI brings.
Are you guys seeing any traffic pattern difference as traffic moves from north-south to east-west? And then as we start getting more agentic AI, so these AI agents are working 24/7 versus, worrying about when people are downloading the next version of Tour of Duty or, whatever the Mother's Day event is these days. But, how is your traffic changing on the network with AI?
Got to reiterate more. We just see our bandwidth use just going up. We see that.
We're still remaining pretty consistent for our bandwidth. We've set the table for the anticipation of what it's going to be. when all those applications start hitting, we've upgraded the links going out of the city from 100 gig to 400 gigs. We go from 400 to 800 gigs between all of our HUT locations. But really, our traffic's remained pretty constant other than Thursday night football. And we see a big sharp increase then on Prime. So,
What about you, Matt?
So I haven't seen a huge difference in the traffic, but if I look at a few years, I've never been a big believer in the cloud. I feel like the cloud is just mainframes trying to inch back into our control of everything. So allow me to put my tinfoil hat on for a minute. And I think one of the biggest potentials of having a lot of upstream is it provides the possibility that within the next 4 to 5 years, we can see the introduction of some kind of application where you can move your stuff off the cloud and users could actually take more control over their own data, keep it in their house where they have control over it, they can adjust who has access, and have local AI that just goes out and gets tokens as needed instead of being dependent on cloud infrastructure. So that's one of the things I think would start to, that's the killer application I think for upstream bandwidth, is the fact that if I want to host my own equivalent of what I would normally post on Facebook in my house, and I can grant access to that to who I want to have access to, as opposed to being data mined or having it sit in a data center or in the cloud. That's where I think in 4 to 5 years, we're going to start to see a little bit of a backlash where that's where the upstream bandwidth is going to become much more important. Right now, the upstream bandwidth is more important to get your data and be mined and analyzed and used in other ways, whereas I think there is a democratizing possibility out there if the applications start to get developed.
No, that's a good point, because I think AI, one of the things that's definitely happening is AI is accelerating cyber threats and fraud. It makes it very scary, right? Because, you know, I don't know how many invoices I get from people that look very legitimate that wants me to pay all this money to some crazy location. But I mean, so is that what you think, is that we'll move less, you know, more local control over data?
Well, I think there's going to be, the opportunity exists, whether an economic model can be built around it, and kind of depends on how the public reacts too. Because we've seen, you know, this push towards cloud, and now we're starting to see, you know, this backlash against data centers, I think is part of a reaction against that. You know, there's an acknowledgement of some of the environmental impacts of data centers, energy consumption. We've got a shortage of the ability to support the infrastructure for some of these. Now, fiber is one of the contributing factors. Being able to communicate between data centers is one part where fiber plays a huge chunk of that. But, you know, being able to distribute compute load to places where you have enough power or cooling infrastructure, you know, back out into rural areas, for example. Like we have old sugar factories in some of our towns that already have power infrastructure, that already have a lot of the things you would need, but they aren't really being developed. So I think we could start to see that where the load starts to get spread out into more remote areas, and then even further into the home where, you know, if you have spare computing resources, you can use that locally as opposed to having to go out to a data center to have it all done for you. So that's where I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity in the future, because it's really hard to consolidate this stuff without just tremendous amounts of investment.
All right,
Can I jump in on this AI real quick?
yeah, no, I mean, because
Yeah.
Google had this genius plan of accelerating the whole industry, and now the applications are here.
Yeah, no, when we've seen a pretty significant uptick in people upgrading from 1 gig to either 3 gig or to 8 gig. And is that the result purely of AI? No, but that's a factor in it for sure. The AI, the PlayStation, my son very much is happy about the 3 gig that we have. It is because of all of these other applications that people are now believe that they need some faster service, they need more gigs. So we've seen a pretty significant uptick in people that are upgrading their service. And then on the AI part about how it interplays with our work, like it's like you said, AI could work 24/7. But there's a balancing act that you have to do. If somebody goes onto the website and you've got an AI that can answer some questions, that can only take you so far. Because at some point, people are going to want to talk to somebody. And sometimes the AI can't answer their question. I actually got a call yesterday from a city manager who said, one of my residents called in, he's been on this AI loop all day, and can somebody just please call him? You know, and so at some point, the AI it does help. I mean, it does help the more, you know, it can be efficient, it can be convenient, but ultimately you're going to get to a point where people are going to want to talk to somebody. And I think that's the customer service part that we talked about at the beginning, that you need to have a way where people can ultimately talk to somebody and can get their questions answered and have some transparency and know that there's people want to talk to a human being. I've heard that so many times. And we're just trying to, you know, we're still doing that balancing act.
Yeah, unless there are kids, you can call them up and they'll send you a text with a 3-word response, right? But
KK.
yeah, there it is. So you got, 8 gig, 2 gig, 3 gig, 4 gig, 5 gig, whatever they're going. But Dennis, you're seeing a little bit different, right? People are more, some in your community, downshifting?
Well, I just think it's a sign of where we're at economically. And we have an aging community and stuff. And so where we were, I think we're 85% 1 gig, and then we're 15% on the 100 meg. We're seeing a few more people that are ordering the 100 meg now rather than the gig. But then on the other hand, you still have those that want to upgrade to the 2.5 to 10. So yeah, we're seeing a little different landscape as the weeks go on.
Just to make a comment, that we're talking the connections in the homes and everything, but there's a big impact on the other side, right? On the upstream connections or the major carrier type connections. And we used to see like our biggest connections between data centers and universities and things like that were these like 10 gig wave services. And then over the years that became 100 gig services. Now our biggest customers are 400 gig services, and we have multiple, and it's like, that's massive. And my network's got to be bigger than that if I'm delivering 400 gig service to a customer. So that's a trend that we see on the enterprise side of the business, which again, to your point, it's not just AI, but it's all of the things, and AI is definitely a factor in that.
Well, Matt, sorry. You just put in a big fat pipe into Denver, right?
Well, no, actually, we're gonna move our network core probably to Cheyenne, out of Denver, just because we've got BEAD projects that we're looking at. When we get them all done, we'll have our own dark fiber coming back to that data center, and so our goal is to try and get as much of that onto our own infrastructure in that way. I know the original question talking about the 100 gig or the 100 meg downgrades. I think on our demographic, I think we're more like 30 to 35% of our customers are on. We only have 3 price points, and we vary the speeds according to the technology. So there's the value one, the fast one, and then the as fast as it goes. And probably 35% are on the value one, and we've seen that pretty consistently. But that also reflects we're more rural demographic that doesn't generally have the same kind of income that a lot of the urban areas do.
Open Vault's, your fourth quarter report showed that really everything's converging into 2 tiers. So the value customers are going to low cost, and that's the 200 meg to 400 meg nationally, and then they're buying as much bandwidth as they can get. And this kind of the middle tier is disappearing, which is really interesting. And then anybody below the 2 to 400 is usually because there's a technology can't support it, like a Starlink or something like that, which is really interesting. That is, with the economic situation that people are trying to, but go back to Recon, it really determines the amount of capacity you have in your home, determines the type of the devices, whether you're working from home, whether you're doing online schooling, whether you're doing telehealth, or you're just doing basic emails and social media, really determines by your connection. Let's move into bundling. So back in the day, like everybody hated bundling, right? Because to get that ESPN channel, you had to have 200 channels of crap. But now we're kind of back to bundling. So what kind of, I don't know, maybe Roger, start with you on kind of where's this whole bundling cycle now?
It's a mess. Consumers are trying to figure out what to do. They're like, which streaming services do I have? I've got, providers adding mobile lines to services, try to get me, bundled into something so that it's sticky and it's harder to leave, right? But then other people are like, I don't want to get my wireless service from my fiber provider because now I'm going to be stuck. So it goes both ways, right? So it's a harder sell, and it's frustrating sometimes to get pushed into bundles because of some promotional rate, but once you get them, then it's easier to keep them, and it's all over the place. We see it. For us, we're kind of on the side of unbundling because we're like, hey, we've got all these different ISP options on our network. Just pick and choose from them, and it's easy to be nimble with your service provider if you're not locked into these bundles. But at the same time, they're like, well, if I'm going to go compete against, AT&T and they're offering a wireless line, maybe I need to bundle that. So we do have options on our network that bundle wireless. We have options that bundle, your more traditional cable TV type service, and not non-cable, but a heavy TV package, right, with the traditional lineup. We have others that help people through the process of picking and choosing their little a la carte streaming services and doing in-home kind of support for people. So it's all over the place. I think it's not ideal because it's frustrating for consumers, right? They don't really know what to do, and they need some help.
So, I mean, one of the things that the cable company, and, we're in the, the heart of cable country here, but what cable companies have done really well is ARPU, right? I mean, they have a lot of its fees, but they do bundle really well. They have a lot of, high revenue per user, the best of anybody, in the industry. But AT&T, as you mentioned, they do really well on convergence. So I think the last earnings report, Stanky said they have almost 50% of their fiber customers take their wireless service. So it is, it seems to work. And I hear Wall Street say that. First, what fiber wins the broadband business. First was fiber wins the mobile business. You see T-Mobile buying up fiber providers like crazy. So, Matt, what do you guys bundle?
So we're working on a mobile bundle. I've not been a big fan of the bundling, but we're kind of begrudgingly doing a little bit of it. I think kind of like Roger's seeing as well. I feel like it's been used more as a lever on behalf of the corporate side of the equation as opposed to the customer. So when we run into situations we're competing with say a cable provider, and if they've got the cell phones and if they've got the mobile phones as part of their bundle, it makes it a lot harder for somebody to switch. And then a lot of times they'll come back and, we'll give you a deal or whatever. And one of the things that really, I think customers get sick of after a while is the yo-yo of, you're on the promotional deal and it's this price. And then 12 months later it goes up to this. And then you have to call to try and figure it out or threaten to cancel to get back on the other side of it. So I'm a big believer in trying to be consistent. So we haven't done a lot of promotional stuff. We haven't really focused on the bundle. We've focused on, kind of talking with the customer and trying to, we look at when we go to do an install as kind of our superpower. That's our opportunity to build a relationship with the customer. And building that good relationship is more important than trying to come up with a cute bundle or promotional package. Now, we're still going to probably do some of that going forward, but I don't see it as being really a core. It's more of a sideline to try and help customers and provide something that's going to be of value to them. Anything we want to do, we want to try and provide more value than somebody else will. And I feel like a lot of the corporate side of that, it isn't really about, it's providing value to themselves as opposed to providing the value to the customer.
That's great. Alberto, what do you guys bundle?
Yeah, we don't. We're an internet-only provider with an exception or two in some legacy markets, but we don't. We don't bundle. We provide the internet product. And I will say that talking to our door-to-door team when we have our sales meetings, the number one obstacle that they face when they're going to talk to a new customer in a new market is somebody saying, oh, we'd love to get you, but my phone is with this other company, or my TV's with this other company. So I see the benefits of bundling if you want to keep your customers, because it's really hard to get them to change that, because sure, they want the GFiber, but they don't want to lose their cell service. They don't want to lose their internet. It's just going to have to be a whole process for them to go and unbundle all of that. So, we don't bundle, but we do go up against a whole bunch of people who do, and it does make it difficult to get people to change once they're in that bundle.
So if we look at, our marketing group, So we have 20 different committees and working groups at the Fiber Broadband Association. So Kimberly Biddy at EPB, and unfortunately Katie's flight didn't make it, if you're wondering what happened to Katie on the panel. But what they are advocating for is building personas, right? Because this whole concept of how much bandwidth you need, or what latency, or what jitter, or all these specs. If you go to your power company, you don't sit there and say, how many watts or megawatts or kilowatts, or who knows, right? Or your water company, how many gallons of water you need. You just need what you need and make sure that you have enough. So now that we're kind of you have enough for the moment, what do you guys are looking at any personas so that you, especially as you're thinking about cybersecurity and other things, but like the family package or the work from home package or the gamer package, or something that kind of figures all that in so that you have all the right features and functionalities to different personas, so no one has to figure out that on their own. They're like, well, yeah, we're the work from home family, so we need the work from home package.
Yeah, if I could jump in here, and I got to get my cheat sheet, because that's exactly something we just launched, was this lifestyle product. And it's called, it's the 1, 3, and 8 gig product, but there's a lot more explanations about, about who needs these products. Like, we call the 1 gig now the core product. And that's, for household, it's, for either you or your roommate, it's, for you live in an apartment, it's the core product, and it gives you 1 gig of service, and we go up from there. There's the home product that we market for the busy family or professionals who work from home, and have, a whole bunch of descriptors in there. And then we have the edge product, 8 gig. And that's for the household that needs the next generation and that loves to be first adopters, that loves the no limit experience. So, that's exactly something that we've leaned into is, like you said, you're right, you don't call the power company and say, I need this many. This, it's here's who we are, here's what my home is, where would we fall into that? And it at least gives people a starting point to know, because, people hear 1 gig, 3 gig, 8 gigs, and some people want to rush to the 8. Others are like, why do I even need that? But so here's a way that shows, hey, here's some classifications of people that might need these types of levels.
Anybody else?
We don't have personas per se, but the customer service reps, technical service reps, the NOC techs have all been trained to ask those questions of the customer about their main use for it, how many devices they have in the network, how many family members they have, and then we'll make recommendations based off that.
We're probably more in line with that, just kind of guiding people versus like ignoring the speed tiers, but it's like, obviously it's a hard question to answer when people don't know what they need. So there is some, are you a gamer, and do you have, what's your household size? How do you expect to use this? The answer is always buy the best thing. I'm just kidding, but they guide them and help through that. But ultimately, it kind of comes back to some of the other things of just capturing that customer with the reliability and those other things. Like, reliability is important for everyone, right? And a reputation. And I think it's important to note, like, across this board here, I think we'd say you guys probably all have much better net promoter scores as unbundlers, right? Like, you're keeping people happy, and these bundles and some of these methods out there, the promotions and the game and the haggle and all that stuff that happens, while it is a short-term gain that works, it is a tool out there for some of these providers, it ends up ticking off your customers and doesn't bring that loyalty. But those that are like, hey, we're here for you, and we have transparent pricing, good customer service, good Google ratings, good net promoter scores, and that sort of thing, you're going to get those customers back or even keep them and weather the storm of the short-term promotions and bundling and things that do ultimately tick off their customers.
So Dennis, you mentioned your installer. It's the person actually in the house engaging with the end user. Unfortunately, Katie's not with us, but, EPB was the first gigabit city, the first 10 gig city, the first 25 gig city in the country, in the nation, in the world. But they also have 70% market share. And they were wondering why people weren't taking the gig. And what they found out is that when the technician was in the home, the subscriber saying, well, what level of service do we need? And they're like, oh, you don't need that gig, you just get the whatever package. And so really, they were shooting themselves in the foot. And so they put training in place to help their technicians understand the value of the different packages, and so they could make better suggestions. And even when I had my 5 gig put in my house, you know, I didn't know what streaming service to do, and the, you know, tech said, well, YouTube TV is a good one. You know, I didn't do any research. I said, okay, that's good enough for me. But so it is a really, you know, that person there, you trust them because they're the guy putting the fiber in, or the, you know, the router in, the gateway. And I mean, what, are you guys seeing that? Do you have to work with your, you know, customer interfacing staff to let them know, make sure they're well trained?
Yeah, I talked about the training for those. Yeah, for our technicians, it's the same way. We got a great sales and marketing team. They come in and talk to our techs often and give them the points about why a customer would need that level of service. But they do get asked that question, and they, again, try to understand what the customer needs are, size of the house, members in the family, all that good stuff.
Yeah, we run into that too. We come in as a trusted party because we're literally owned by these communities, right? Or ownership of these is municipal for the most part. So our technicians or customer service or whoever they interface with, we're like, we're here to help you. You know, we work for you, you own this system, and then we can help guide them into tiers or service provider selections that are appropriate for them. But yeah, that's important to have that interaction with them.
I know we optimize for customer experience as opposed to efficiency. So if you optimize to try and get as many installs done as possible, guys cut corners. You know, they zip through to get into the next one. So we actually optimize. There's an equal bonus. I think it's relatively equal to get a positive customer review or to get the customer to upgrade to a different service. So, you know, if they hit the home run and they are establish a good relationship with the customer and they find out that they want to have a higher tier, great, but we don't force them to do it. It's focusing on what the customer wants is where we optimize.
And that's us as well. Like our installers, I mean, they're knowledgeable about the product, of course, but they are definitely not in there to upsell you on the product. You know, they've talked to our sales team. They know what they're signing up for. Our team goes in there and they install. If they're asked questions, yeah, they'll absolutely answer those, but that's not their goal. Their goal is customer service, just like you were saying. And we have customer satisfaction surveys after the install, and we have our head of drops, we call them, our head of install. Anybody that doesn't fill out the customer service satisfaction report, she calls. She calls that home just to make sure everything went okay. Anything that's under a 9, she calls to ask what happened. So really the focus is on, that's their first real interaction with GFiber. And we need that first interaction to be positive. And so, you know, that is the emphasis on our drops and installers is you need to be professional, you need to be courteous, you need to clean up after yourself, and you need to answer the questions to the best of your ability, and we make sure that happens. And if somebody asks you about, they have some background, they have training. If somebody asks you about service, do you think I should do this? Of course, they're going to answer, but they're not in there to pressure or to upsell anybody, and we check that on the customer satisfaction report.
Well, I had promised to allow the audience to have a question or two. Does anybody have a question? Oh. Jeff, can you help me out? I have to. Right behind you.
Uh-oh, you're in trouble, Jeff. My name is Elise Brentnell. I'm the Chief Operations Officer with South Valley Internet in California. And I've got a question for you. So we also offer 2.5 and 8 gig service. And the reality is the hardware doesn't keep up. So you're saying that people test, specifically this question is to Google Fiber. How do they test? Because their laptops don't go to 2.5 or 3 gigs. Right. So how are they actually testing to get this speed? And can you tell us, you briefly touched on this, but for those of you that offer faster, I think some of you set up to 8 gigs. Talk to me about the percentages there and what are you seeing as far as utilization? Because for me, I look at that and I think any home that needs 8 gigs is keeping up with the Joneses, or is the Joneses. Yeah. So can you give us some more information there? Thank you.
Sure, I'll answer the first part of your question to the best of my ability, keeping in mind I'm the government affairs guy, not the tech guy. But we have this, on our app, in theory, you're supposed to go at home, I can put the app near the router, and it gives me the exact speeds that are coming on, in and out of, I got a KKK from my son. we just talked about how teenagers don't answer your phone, but just FYI. But in theory, it's going to tell you what your speeds are at that exact moment. The technology behind that, I don't know. I know I could have to get back to you on that particular question. On the 8 gig part, if you want.
Yeah, so we do 10 gig, and that's challenging because you're like, how do you show 10 gig, right? So our technicians, they're all equipped with iPads with little Thunderbolt adapters that actually run a test and show the customer, this is a real test from Ookla that's at over 9 gig, and you're like, well, there's some overhead, so we're always guaranteeing 90% or more of the speed because you've got overhead in there, right? And then the customer's like, well, so then how do I experience this? And there's really two categories of 10 gig customers. There's the 10 gig customer that says, I have 10 gig because I just want the best thing and my company will reimburse me for whatever I get, and it's still cheaper than Comcast, so awesome, I want 10 gig. So that's like half of them. They're never going to see 10 gig because they're not going to have the equipment in their home to really use it. And then there's the other half which does use it, and that's the power users, the gamers, or whatever, and they're going to have a 10 gig router, or they're going to say, I'm going to make sure I've got that Wi-Fi 7 router, which we're always like, look, you're not going to wire your whole house for 10 gig, right? But if you've got a Wi-Fi 7 router and you start getting some of the newer devices, you're going to start seeing really good speeds because that technology supports it, but most of your clients still are not Wi-Fi 7. So it's coming, and then we have conversations about what about in-home fiber, right? And distribution in the house and stuff. Well, we're not there yet, but it definitely is trending higher and higher. But the more practical short term is Wi-Fi 7, and obviously there's Wi-Fi 8, another thing in development. But seeing device generations improve and the standards for wireless in the home improve, you'll see that more and more. But today it's still tough, right? And even that, you're like, the 10 gig is more an aggregate versus like, I want to see this one device get that 10 gig connection. It's like, yeah, that's not practical, but where the fiber comes into the house, can you test there and show 10 gig? Yeah, we can, and we can reliably, but it's more of an obstacle. How do you get that everywhere in the house? It gets a little tricky.
Oh, great question. And I just want to thank our panelists for just all the great insights. So hope you guys have a wonderful time here.